All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Oklahoma Arts Council's second grant workshop of 2021. This grant workshop is specifically for major grant support organizations submitting community arts projects as part of their upcoming 2021 grant cycle. This is Thomas Tran, Grants Director here at Oklahoma Arts Council. We are so happy that you could join us today. We also have our fantastic team of grants and program staff members on the call to go through the grants application with you all. A poll should have popped up on your screen. If you could please complete the poll, we'll go over the results here in a few minutes, but that will just tell us a little more about everyone here in the session today, and it'll help us tailor the way we discuss the application so that you all can get the most from this workshop. If you haven't already, please introduce yourselves using the chat box. That's the chat button at the bottom of the screen. Your name, your role and organization, and how you're feeling today. As we go through this workshop, if you have any tips or tricks that you might want to share with the others on this call, please feel free to put that into the chat. That is your space to talk amongst each other and share your experiences and share your knowledge. And if you have any questions during this workshop, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A box. That's the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If you just drop your questions into there, we'll be responding to your questions throughout the workshop as well. All right, so I will go over our agenda today before we get started. This is just so we can get a sense for what's coming up, and so you all can plan your questions and kind of know what's going to be happening during the session. We're going to get started with our introductions first. So we'll be introducing our OAC staff members. We'll go over Oklahoma Arts Council's, our grant programs, and the major grant support program. Then we will dive into the main event of this workshop. We will go through the grant application. We'll be taking you through every single question in the application, so you know what to expect, but at the same time, you'll know what our grant reviewers are asking, what questions they're asking, and what they want to know as they're evaluating your proposals. After the grant application, we'll briefly address COVID-19. We'll go over the support material requirements and how you can submit your support material to us. We will then look at scoring criteria so you get a sense of how your applications are being scored and evaluated. We will show you how to navigate through our online grant system if you're not familiar or if you want to take a look around the grant system. And then we will close by answering any unanswered questions that we may have or that you may have. Again, if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to click on the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen and type in your question and send that our way. We will be getting to your questions throughout the workshop, but if we don't get a chance to address your question, then please feel free to reach out to any one of us and we'll be happy to answer your question. I see a few chats here that ask, can you unmute yourselves? With this platform today, we are not unmuting calls. So again, if you have questions, please drop them into the Q&A box. All right, we will go over our pre-workshop survey. So the first question is, are you new to your organization? It looks like we have a few people who are new, but the majority of our attendees today are returning with their organization. Have you submitted an OAC grant application before? 86% said yes and 14% said no. So we'll make sure that we go through the detail and make sure that you feel like you have the tools in order to submit your applications. Question number 3, are you submitting an application for a new project that your organization has not implemented before? We have 24% submitting new projects and 76% submitting reoccurring or annual projects. Thank you so much for participating in that survey. Now that we have a better sense of who is in the room today, we are excited to talk to you and tell you more about the grant application. All right, so we'll get started with our introductions. I'm going to hand it off to Heidi Costello.
Hello, everyone. I am Heidi Costello. I serve as a Grants and Programs Assistant. I use pronouns she, her, hers. I have been with the agency for a little bit over a year now, and most of you all will probably interact with me anytime that you have any login questions, or if I can provide any technical support when it comes to submitting support materials, accessing the grant system, things of that nature, or if you need to get any of your new board presidents or anybody access to there, I'm your gal. I serve the program and the grants department in many different ways, but I'm just really excited to be here and dive deep into the major grant support. Super excited that we get to grant out, and I love this is one of my favorite parts of the job, is just getting to read all the grant programs and just see all the wonderful work that you all are doing in the state. So thanks. And like Thomas said, I will be monitoring the Q&A box. So feel free to drop any of your questions in there, and then I will get to them as we progress, or we will answer them live. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Heidi. And this is Thomas Tran speaking. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the grants director here at Oklahoma Arts Council, and I'm approaching my 5th year with the agency. So in my role, I oversee our agency's grant programs. With Heidi and the rest of the team, we all work together to develop and review grant applications, find opportunities for innovation and growth through public investment for the arts, and provide guidance and technical support for our applicants and our grantees across the state as they apply for funding. I manage the operations and design of our grant programs, taking a look at how our agency is responsive to the state's arts and cultural sector, and ensuring that we strategically invest in communities and programs that are reflective of and will benefit all Oklahomans. Ways that you might interact with me is if you have questions about your grants, your grant eligibility as a whole, or if you have questions about your grant applications, you're free to contact me. But mainly, if you are awarded a grant, you will be contacting me for questions about managing your award, project changes, especially around COVID-19, and other general questions about how you can manage that grant award too. So that's my role. I will pass it on to our program staff members. Kayla.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Thomas. My name is Kayla Lewis, and I am the Community Arts Director here at the Oklahoma Arts Council. My pronouns are she and her. And I've also been with the agency just for over a year. My first day was January 6, 2020. So here we are. But thankfully, I've got to meet some of you all. Most of my work is with the community arts programs and our cultural district initiative. And I'm on the cultural development team with Yakum.
I guess it's me next. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're doing rather very well today. My name is Yakum Gulalat. I am the Cultural Development Director. Basically, that entails a lot of things revolving around data, as well as diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and then last but not least, it's quite a bit of a title. So I do a lot of things around here, but you can reach me with any questions regarding evaluation of your projects, since data is part of what I do. If you have any questions regarding your measure and your outreach, I would be more than happy to converse with you on any capacity in that matter. So welcome.
All right, thank you so much, Joachim. And Jennifer Allen Barron is our Arts Education Director. She is not on the workshop call for today, but Jennifer oversees all of our arts learning in communities and arts education in schools, grant applications, as well as all of our learning and education-based programs for the agency. So that is our programs team, Kayla, Joachim, and Jennifer. You will primarily interact with them. If we have any questions about your grant application, or if we need any clarifications, then they will most likely reach out to you with those questions. If you have questions as you're developing your application, if you are not sure if a program you have is the right fit for our grant programs, please reach out to them. They are happy to answer your questions. If you don't know which staff member to contact, just contact any one of us and we will point you in the right direction. All right, so that was our introduction for our staff members. Oklahoma Arts Council. We are the state government agency for the support and development of the arts in Oklahoma. So throughout our history of more than 50 years, we've implemented numerous programs and initiatives to establish the arts as a transformative force for the state by improving education, enhancing quality of life, and boosting economic development. Our mission is to lead in the advancement of Oklahoma's thriving arts industry. All right, and to support our mission and our vision, one of the most important things that we do is ensure that every Oklahoman has access to arts and cultural activities and experiences. In the past year, 66% of our agency's budget was invested directly into communities across the state through our grants. That's $2.8 million that went to almost 300 organizations and schools, all to support arts programming. So who is eligible for Oklahoma Arts Council grants? Well, if you're on this workshop, you should already be eligible as a major grant support applicant and grantee. But in general, we are able to support 501c3 nonprofit organizations that are incorporated in the state of Oklahoma, K through 12 schools, which includes public, charter, and private non-religious schools, public libraries, colleges and universities, and other agencies of government that includes tribal governments and municipalities. One thing to keep note here is the majority of our grantees are 501c3 nonprofit organizations. And one thing that we do encourage is that all of our nonprofit organizations, please file your Form 990s to the IRS every year, or at least keep up with your filings if you have to push it off a year or so. If you do not file your Form 990s for 3 consecutive years, your 501c3 status is automatically revoked. In addition to that, there may be other reasons why your exempt status is revoked as well. So we ask that you all keep in good standing with the IRS. You can do this by making your filings every year, but also checking the IRS website every once in a while to make sure that you're all right. One thing that I try to remember is a little saying, 990 a year or your exempt status disappears. All right, so we've expanded our grant programs in the past few years to meet the diverse needs in the state and also to respond to different opportunities for growth and investment. On the screen, we've listed our current grant programs. They all have their individual and specific goals, eligibility criteria, and deadlines. You can find more information about these on our website at arts.ok.gov. We also promote all these opportunities in our newsletter and on social media. So right now, the open grant opportunities that we have includes the classroom supply grants for visual and performing arts. So this is for K through 12 schools. If you know of any educators or education administrators that might be in need of arts supplies, then they may be eligible to apply for a $500 grant. This grant is open right now and is closing on February the 1st. So please pass the word on, and we really appreciate it. And that deadline is quickly approaching. Other grant programs that are open right now: small grant support for schools, arts and alternative education, and our small grant support. Those are not available to you all since you're applying under a different grant program, but these are different opportunities to other nonprofits and other organizations that are open right now. We accept those applications on a rolling basis. And then we have our major grant support program, which we're speaking about today, as well as other grant programs, emergency relief. We've provided emergency relief funds 2 separate times so far in response to the pandemic. So again, these are just different ways that we're investing in the arts across the state. If you have more questions about that, please feel free to contact me. We're here to discuss major grant support. We are talking about the upcoming funding cycle for 2022. This is for all programs and projects that are occurring between July 1st, 2021, running all the way through June 30th, 2022. And again, we call this funding cycle or fiscal year 2022. We use those terms interchangeably. The application deadline is February the 15th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. So taking a little step back and looking at the larger timeline, just so you know what's coming up and what's happened, the application is currently open right now for major grant support. Last week, we had our arts education and arts learning grant workshop. So if you didn't get the chance to tune into that one, we will be sending out a link, a video link to that to you all. We'll also be recording today's session and sending that out as well. February 15th is the application deadline. That's due at 11:59 p.m. We encourage for you to submit your application in advance. because there may be delays, there may be system issues on that date if there's a large volume. So please submit the applications as far in advance as you can. And that way, if there's anything that comes up, you have ample time to contact us and we can work together to get your application submitted. July and June 2021, that's when we will be sending out award notifications. July 1st is when the funding cycle for 2022 begins. And then throughout the year, your final reports will be due 30 days after the end of your project. On June 30th, that is the final day of funding cycle 2022. And that's when you'll probably know your determination for the next year's grants. So that's just our timeline as a snapshot. You can find this on your grants guidelines document as well. The goals of the Major Grant Support Program is to maintain and strengthen arts and cultural programs provided to the public, including engagement with under-resourced and underrepresented communities. And this directly ties back to the mission and the vision that we were discussing earlier. Our goal is to make sure that all Oklahomans have access to the arts. So as you're sending in your applications and you're working on your narratives, please keep this in mind. That's the lens that we're working from. So we like to look at our grantees as a way to expand the arts so that more people can have the opportunity to get that engagement. As you're compiling your applications, please keep that in mind. And that's something that all of our grant reviewers are thinking about as well. Major Grant Support provides project-based funding, and you can apply for up to 5 unique projects per grant period. We do require a one-to-one match as part of the grants, but 50% of that match may be in-kind supports, and all of these grants are reimbursed payments. So we do not send out a grant award until after the project ends and after a final report is submitted. And when we talk about projects, we define a project as a series of connected events with a beginning date, an ending date, and a predetermined budget. So what a project might look like is, might be a summer concert series. Maybe it's 5 different concerts occurring during the summer. So there is a beginning date and an ending date. And then you have a set budget for that. It could also be just one event. It could be one visual exhibition that you have one day a year. So it's however your organization defines a project. These are just the general guidelines. The application process. So you all submit your applications, but there's a lot that goes on after that. This gives you a little idea and a peek into the process. So you submit the application. What happens next? We review your application. We utilize a community grant reviewer pool of people across the state with different expertise and diverse backgrounds to read your applications and assess them independently. We also have our Oklahoma Arts Council staff review your application as well, and our council members appointed by the governor. Once we have all of that information and we reviewed your application, looking at your score, looking at any comments that were provided from our reviewers, we put together a funding recommendation that we bring forward to our 15-member governor-appointed council. They make all final funding determinations for our agency. And after that happens, then we notify you all about your grant awards. This happens in June and July. From there, we ask that your authorizing official log in to the grant system and accepts the contract on behalf of your organization. Your project occurs, and then you submit a final report, which lets us know that you are ready to receive a grant payment. So that's our grant application process in a nutshell. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have right now.
Thomas, we have no questions at this time. And just a reminder, you can ask in the Q&A box and we will answer them live as we go.
Awesome, thank you so much, Heidi. So we'll move on to our next slide, which is the grant application. This is what you are here for. So I will go over the organizational questions and then we will hand it off to our program staff members to go into the details about what your community arts project application will be asking for. Just as a reminder, if you could please submit your questions in the Q&A box. In the chat box, it's a little difficult to navigate. So please send your questions into the Q&A box. All right, so you have started your grant application. What are the first things that you see? We are going to ask you to update your organization's information. Question number one, enter your organization's mission as it appears in your bylaws. Please update that as you can. We know that your mission might change every once in a while, so please send in your most current mission for us to use. Number two, briefly describe your organization, its history, and its constituents. Mainly the latter half. We really want to know about your community. Please tell us about your geographic location, your constituents, the people in your community, who do you serve, and also what are the needs in your communities and how your organization meets those needs. That's what we really want to know from this question. Question number three, enter the number of board members for your organization. And number four, enter your organization's DUNS number. If you have questions about your DUNS number, you can contact your finance office for your organization or your finance officer. They should have that information. All of this information is automatically populated from what you submitted last year, but please read through it and update as necessary. We do not know if there are any changes to your organization unless you let us know. So we do appreciate that. The next page is for our legal assurances. Question number one, enter your organization's current year operating budget. This can be whatever year that your organization is using. You might be operating off of the calendar year, or you have your own unique fiscal year system. We use July through June. So whatever your organization uses, what is your budget for this year? This gives us an idea of your work as a whole and then how your arts programming and all of your arts work fits within that. Question number two, legal assurances. I'm going to flip over to this slide. This slide includes highlights from the legal assurances. These are not your full legal assurances. So for a full list, you can see that in your grant application and your grant contracts. So since Oklahoma Arts Council is a state government agency, we utilize funds from state government and from the federal government. If we are granting these funds out to you all as our grantees, you are required to withhold the same contractual obligations that is coming with these funds, since these are public dollars. So what's required? Some of what's required is Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination based on color, race, and national origin. Section 504, which prohibits the discrimination based on disability. Title IX, which prohibits discrimination based on sex. Drug-Free Work Act, you must maintain a drug-free work environment. The ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, prohibits discrimination based on the basis of disability in employment, state and local government services, and place of public accommodation and commercial facilities. So again, as with this point, as with all of them, since you are utilizing public dollars to implement your programs, you are required to abide by these. Since we're contracting with your organization to implement a project that is considered a partial government project as well. Age Discrimination Act of 1975 prohibits discrimination based on race. In addition to all of these, we do ask that you retain all records, and including financial records for your projects for at least 7 years. In the event that there is a state or federal audit of your records, you are required to produce those to us. We also prohibit the use of our funds to benefit or support any religious affiliated organization, service, or any church. And as well with that, when you submit a grant application, all the facts and figures that are in the application are true and correct to your knowledge at the time of the application. So those are just a few of the highlights from our legal assurances. Again, you can see the full list when you start your application. Question number two asks if you acknowledge that if your application is selected for funding, you will need to comply with these assurances. Question number three, enter the name of the person completing this grant application. All right, and this next section is only viewable to our arts-based 501c3 nonprofits. These are just questions that we ask our nonprofit arts organizations so that we have a better sense of your work and how that relates to the economy. This does not affect your grant application or your award amount in any way. This is just for us to gather some data and to inform our work in the future. All right, so after you answer all those questions, you only have to do that once, and you are then free to start working on your project applications. Again, you can submit up to 5 unique projects each fiscal year or each funding cycle. In order to do this, you have to choose the project type first. So what we're talking about today is the community arts programs. Kayla will be speaking more about what they are. And then the other 2 types are arts learning in communities and arts education in schools. These are more hands-on learning based projects. So if your program has anything to do with learning or learning goals or education, then it might fall under that category. We will be sending out a link to that workshop in a few days. But without further ado, I will send it off to Kayla Lewis, our Community Arts Director, to talk about our community arts programs.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. I just want to pause really fast. I saw that there were some questions coming through the chat. Should we address those at a later time, or some of them have been answered live? Should I leave a space right now for questions?
Yeah, we can address some of them right now. Again, everyone, if you can please send your questions into the Q&A box. It's difficult to read through the chat because there's other communication in there. So if you do have questions, please send them in using the Q&A and we'll get them answered there. Heidi, are there any questions that we have to answer right now?
Yes. So, and we can go more into detail with some of them, but just kind of so we can see. We had a question about cancellations for a season for concerts and such for the 2020 to 2021 season, and so Thomas will go over the specifics of how to go about reporting with that in the COVID-19 section. Another COVID-19 question that we got specifically was, it says, can you fund a project that ends after the June 30th deadline due to COVID-19? So Thomas, do you want to just briefly talk about just both for COVID-19 and other programs that kind of fall in that summer timeline? I know we have some organizations here that might have some summer programs.
Yes, thank you, Heidi. I'm happy to address that question. So let me change the slide here. So for a grant period, again, we operate off of a fiscal year cycle of July 1 through June the 30th. So all of our grants need to fall within that date. The applications that you're currently working on right now will fall under fiscal year 2022. So these programs that you're putting together and you're submitting applications for, they need to fall between July the 1st, 2021, and the latest that they can happen is June the 30th, 2022. So your project must fall within this year, and it cannot fall outside of this year. If your question, if the question that was asked is pertaining to the current fiscal year that we're in, so funding cycle or fiscal year 2021, then your projects must be completed before June 30th of 2021. We cannot fund anything that falls outside of your grant period. I hope that answers your question. If you want to talk more specifics about that, please shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'm happy to answer that question.
Thanks, Thomas. Another question we had was about funding, and I just want to take the time to briefly answer this one, especially since I did see in the poll that we have some new faces to either the organization or to this grant program. So it says, when will grant funding go out for FY20? So that is, FY20. So that was last year. So if it's a current program that you're working on, funding takes about 4 to 6 weeks after a final report has been submitted, and then our staff can review it. And that's just because we have to work with the state payment processes. So once we get all of your online final report, as well as all of your final report support materials, it goes for review, and then we can go ahead and begin the payment process. So please allow 4 to 6 weeks for that to be completed. And if you know that you've submitted that and it's been longer than the 6-week period, I do encourage you all to please send either Thomas or I an email so we can kind of see where that payment is and kind of do some more specific investigating on that. Let me see. And then we have a question about, can a project be a discrete, oh, I didn't read the discrete program that is delivered virtually on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis? So I think that has a few different parts to that. If one of you wants to take this question.
Thanks, Heidi. So a project is defined however you define it. So the recurrence of it can be, it could be a week long, it could be one day a week for 6 months. It's however your program is structured. So that's up to your determination, but your program must be a public event. Since we are utilizing public funds, this needs to be open to anyone to participate. It cannot be geared towards like your, I don't know, a membership related group. It needs to be open to everyone. So I hope that answers your question there.
All right, Thomas, I can go ahead and go with the rest of kind of the community arts program part of the presentation if you're ready, and we can address questions as they come and are as needed.
All right, thanks so much, Kayla. And just as a reminder, everyone, please send your questions in using the Q&A box. If you have specific questions pertaining to your existing grant awards, please send me an email. Thank you.
All right. Thomas, can we change it? There we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Kayla again. Thanks again to Thomas and Heidi for helping answer those questions. There will be multiple opportunities for you all to ask questions. Again, use the Q&A, but then we'll also go specifically into COVID-19 later on in this presentation if you all have questions specifically for that. But right now we are going to focus on the application itself and what all that entails. So hi again. Hopefully I'll get to work with you all soon, but also hopefully this presentation will be informative enough that you'll have all the tools that you need to complete your application. Though I know there's always questions and we are always happy to answer them. So community arts programs, what are these? These are community and audience-based programs. Examples of these can include, but are not limited to, arts performances, performance seasons, exhibitions, and festivals that have a strong emphasis on the arts. So think arts festivals or live music festivals that are people are able to come and visit and see, and these could be ticketless or require tickets as well. And we'll go to the next slide. And so there's a 5-part application to this. Thomas kind of already went through the organizational information, but this is for the project specific. So I'll go over the project information, the budget, and then the project description and artistic quality. And Joachim will talk about evaluation methods and access and community need. So the first part of this is the project information. This is very straightforward. It's the who, what, where, when, and how. So the title of your project, how many people you expect to serve or will directly benefit from your program, the project dates, and just a quick summary of the project. And then if there are specific dates, I think Thomas mentioned, a project has a start and an end time, so that's important. But what is also important for this is the physical address for the location for the project. You'll want to include all of the locations if you have a main production site, if you have a community engagement event, if you have different venues for the performance and then the rehearsal. Basically any location associated with the project, you'll want to include that. And then of course the specific times for the project. And we want to know who you are and who we're talking to. So you'll want to also have the information for the project coordinator. All right, and then we'll go to the budget, and I'll just kind of quickly go over this. In the next couple of slides, we'll go a little bit more in depth on what that budget entails. So I will just note here that the first three questions, the organization administrative costs, organization artistic costs, and organizational technical costs, will only be on your application if you are an arts-based 501c3. And in, I believe it's the next slide, or the next couple of slides into, we will go into what all of those mean. But yeah, so we have contracted costs, which are outside costs, and then marketing, facilities, travel expenses, and we'll talk about in-kind contributions on the next slide. I'll just define that really quickly for you all. So an in-kind contribution is the fair market value for donated non-monetary goods or services. These contributions may be services, supplies, or discounts made to your organization from an outside identity. So something to think about: what did you have a borrowed stage? Did you have a lot of volunteer help? When we are looking at the application, I'll also give you all a few tips for grant reviewers, because that's who will be looking at this. So in this specific category, grant reviewers will want to make sure that the in-kind items are only include project-specific non-cash contribution of goods or services that your organization would otherwise have to pay for out of pocket. So that's just something to think about in this particular category. I'll also say that in-kind is a way to uh, could be a way for you to balance out your budget if you need to, if you want to, if you have a really large project, but most of it is coming from in kind, that might be a way for you to leverage the overall budget so that you are able to get more funding from the Arts Council. Okay, and we'll go to the next slide, or yeah, so we'll talk about the budget, and this is first income. We're still in the budget, so all income must be specified to the proposed project. So you are only going to want to give us information about this project, not your overall organization, except for the cash on hand, which is another way that you can help to balance out the budget. So we'll go over the ticket income, and sometimes this could be tuition or something that any cost to an individual to be able to participate in this. And then you'll want to describe how you calculated that ticket income, whether that was 300 people at $15 a ticket, or if you have discounted rates, or basically the breakdown of how you get that ticket income amount. And then government support, which is not anticipated grant funds from the Oklahoma Arts Council. And then other sources of income, which is foundation, corporate, private donations. And I will just say that's a great way for us to see that you have outside support for this project, which tells grant reviewers a lot about sustainability for your project. And then total other income, if you have other sources of funding that come in for this, just let us know. All right, here's where we get into the fun stuff. I'll also say math is not my strong suit, so it's great that there's a graph that sort of calculates everything for you, but it's still important to fill everything out correctly. So again, the first three: organization, administration, artistic costs, and technical costs, those will only be on your application if you are a 501c3 arts nonprofit. Otherwise, you won't see that. But so administration is kind of like what it sounds like: anything that's kind of on the back end of, or the behind the scenes work that is needed to complete the project. And then artistic costs, that's the talent, that's the entertainment, that's if you have live music, that's where that would go. And then outside technical, which could be if you need a light technician, a sound technician, something like that, that's where that would go. And then marketing, anything that's related to your promo costs, whether that's print materials or ads or anything like that, that's where that will go. And then facility rental, just if you needed to, this could also be your rehearsal space, or your actual facility that you are having a production. Travel, if there's anything related to travel, normally that would come in if you had to bring someone from out of state or out of the city, and that would go hand in hand with your outside artistic. and then other, and you'll want to explain what those other costs are associated with the program. That's very important too, because we want to see the full picture and the full scope of your project. And then in kind, that's where I mentioned before, you can calculate volunteer hours, you can calculate stage rental, anything like that. That'll go there. And then it all adds up under your expense total. And then on the other side of things, you'll want to make sure that it balances out. And we do math when we see this graph, or when we see this. I think that's a graph when we see this report. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind as well. So your cash income, again, that's organizational cash on hand. Ticket income, we talked a little bit about that. Government support, and then other, what else that might be. I will say, if we kind of go down to the bottom, so all of that gets added up, again, in kind will go across, and then your request in green, so I'll just say that that is your overall request amount, and from the budget that's inputted to the system, you're eligible for what's in green, but that does not necessarily mean that you will receive that. That's just the highest you can receive based on the numbers put in and the match required. So in some of our grants, we have a 1-to-1 match or a 1-to-1 plus in kind match. So that's just something to keep in mind. But that would be what you are most likely eligible for. So we'll go on to the next slide, and we'll have a little bit more to say about that too. Like I said, it's a short slide, but there's a lot to think about here. So in the budget narrative, you will describe how the grant funds will be used, list specific expense items with dollar amounts. The total amount must equal the requested amount. So grant reviewers will want to make sure that the narrative amounts match the budget line items that we just saw in the previous slide. Reviewers will want to make sure everything's lined up, and it is described as it's listed in the narrative as it is with the line items before. And then another question that grant reviewers will ask, it would be if the grant funds requested are for eligible expenses, and we'll get into that in just a second as well. But we'll kind of talk about what we can and can't fund, but I think that's a big important part of this. But overall, just general review considerations for the budget would be that everything is clearly presented and all costs are explained. So if you have a $600 marketing budget, we want to know what that's going to, not $600 marketing. And that's also part of your application as well. But we also want to make sure, and we'll notice if the budget is reasonable for the project size and the scope of the project. And then community support is evident through in-kind contributions and other income. There is a quote that I can't think of exactly, but I do think of this is what I can think of it is, where your budget is, there your heart will be also. And so you're kind of giving us a full scope of what your project is, but you're also showing how this project is supported and sustainable through that. So those are really kind of key important parts to look at and just kind of build up the story that you're telling. So again, that the narrative line items, or that the narrative and the line items match in the budget. And we also want to see that no conflict of interest appears. So if you have board members that you are paying that are also showing up under artistic costs, that's something to keep aware of. And again, that the OAC request is only for eligible expenses, which I will now talk a little bit about. Okay, so here are kind of our general funding guidelines. Of course, we prioritize paying artists. That's really important to our organization. But OAC funds can also support admin fees, technical fees, marketing expenses, facility, equipment, and supply rental. These are things that were listed in the line item budget that I mentioned before. And then licensing, royalty, permit fees, and project-specific consumable supplies. So if you have a community event where there's a craft or something like that, or you need objects to complete that, then there we go. But that would not include items that will essentially live with your organization after the fact. So now we'll go on to what we can't fund, which this list is a little larger, but that's okay. I won't read out all of this, but some of the main things that we cannot fund are capital improvements, and we get a lot of requests about murals and artwork, and those things are not able to use grant funding. And also, religious and lobbying, payments to board members, I mentioned that before. Something to keep in mind is that if it is a non-public event, or if it's something related to college credit, also costs or services that are not rendered, so we can't pay for something that didn't happen. But I think there were questions related to this in COVID. So Thomas will talk a little bit more about that later, and if considerations were made. I will just say, I'll add to this because it looks like a lot of negativity. There's a lot of X's on this page. But some of these items may be a part of your overall budget, which is totally fine, but just know that OAC funds cannot be used to support them. So in your budget narrative, in your request narrative, you would not include us paying, $50 for food or drink or something like that. It would just be all eligible expenses, how the grants can be used. All right, I think we got that. I think we have went over budget things. Are there questions regarding that?
Yes, Kayla, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the budget breakdown. I know we get a lot of questions on how to navigate that. So as you're filling out your budget, if you do have questions, we are just a phone call and an email away. So we are happy to help you all walk through that. One of the questions that we got is that if we are bringing someone from out of state, how do you recommend that we calculate the travel cost when the price of airfare fluctuates? So this is in regards to putting that into your budget request. And since we can't pay for artists, how would we tackle calculating the artists traveling from out of state? And I will direct that to you, Thomas.
All right, thanks so much, Heidi, and thank you for the question. That is a very good one. For travel rates and everything, you could go on Google and just find a rate to an approximate rate. You could look in the future and try to get that as well. I know that we're all trying to plan ahead, and this is for projects occurring next year, so that might be a little difficult. I say build in some cushion into your budget so that you're able to your budget can absorb any increases that might happen. We understand that the budget that you submit right now in February might not look exactly the same after your project happens. This application is just a snapshot of your program or your project at this point in time. So we do know that there will be some fluctuations. Just do your best to put together the most accurate budget that you can, or maybe list like the top that you have budgeted out, so the most that you're going to pay for their travel, and that'll give us a better idea of your budget as a whole. And I hope that answers your question, and let us know if you need anything else there.
All right, thanks, Thomas. The next question says, if an artist is creating new work for an exhibition, could the artist fee be used to help compensate the artist for expenses making the work?
All right, another good question. So through the general funding guidelines we talked about and Kayla covered earlier, our funds cannot be paid for the creation of new artwork. So let's just say this is an exhibition, so a visual art exhibition. Our funds cannot be used to pay the artist for the commissioning of new artwork. This is a little different for performing arts projects. So if you were maybe asking a director or choreographer to come work on a piece, you might be creating a new piece, but if you ask them to come and provide instruction and do a workshop, then our funds can definitely support that workshop. So addressing your question here, is an artist creating an exhibition Could the fee help compensate for the artist's expense making the work? If your artist is going to be at your opening or they're doing some programming around the opening, like you're having an artist talk and you want to pay the artist to be there, then yes, our funds can support that part, but our funds cannot be used in any way to support the actual creation or the commissioning of that artwork. Again, with our project-based funding categories, a project has a beginning date and an ending date. And if you're using funds to support new work, that new work is something permanent. So that would make it ineligible for our support.
All right, thanks, Thomas. And I think I think those are the budget questions that we got for this round. And then I have selected, we will answer live for the other ones, just because I am seeing a lot of COVID-19 specific questions. So I just wanted to get those all together in one space. So we will be answering those momentarily.
Awesome. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Thomas. I will just continue kind of moving on with the application itself. I have one more part to that before Joachim talks about evaluation methods and community need. And right now we'll just go over the project description and artistic quality. So you had the opportunity in your application to give the basic information already, but here's your chance to really tell the story about your project. So describe your project in detail. What's happening? How did you plan this project? How would this program meet the needs of your community? Where will this project take place? And why did you select that specific location and site? And who are your community partners and what are their roles? These are all really important questions to ask when writing this particular part. So you also can provide links to web addresses and supplementary material that is referenced in your narrative. But of course, we do ask that you use these in moderation and just make sure that they only serve to support purpose rather than provide additional narrative content. So a couple questions also that reviewers will want to know would be what are the goals and outcomes for this project? You can say in your project description what you wish to accomplish or what changes you want to see or anticipated benefits and impact for participants after the project is completed. You may be applying for an annual project that you receive funding for every year. I think in the poll there was a mix of people who have applied a lot or people who are new, but we use different grant reviewers every year, so they may not be fully aware of your project. So when you are filling out this particular part, please present as though it's likely that your reviewer has never heard of your project before, even if it may be obvious or anything like that. And the last part I will talk about will be artistic quality. And so here's just what the application looks like. Is this an Oklahoma artist? Is it a member of one of the Oklahoma Arts Council artist rosters? So we have the teaching artist and the performing artist roster, and I would be happy to answer any questions about that as well. But basically, you'll just want to list key project artists with their bios, relevant experience, and roles in relation to your project. So in this, please include your top paid artists. Examples of key artists would be your headliner, if that's a visual or a performing artist. If you are including authors, writers, guest artists and speakers, choreographers, conductors, directors, principal musicians, and also judges and jurors. So I saw in the chat we have a lot of people from a lot of different areas of focus. So your artistic quality and your key artists could be from a lot of different things. And again, with this, you may also provide web addresses or links, but just make sure that you're using those in moderation and that they are only serving to support rather than provide additional content. So I think that kind of goes through, we went through just general project information, the budget, and then the project description and artistic quality. And now I'm going to hand it off to Joachim, who will talk a little bit more about evaluation methods and your community need.
Well, good afternoon. I hope you are enjoying this webinar, and thanks so much for being here today. So now that you've done your project description beautifully, you've really worked out your budget, what happens next is accessibility. Uh, how will you make this project accessible to all the community members you're trying to reach? And then some of the question to ask is that what method of media outlet would you use? Would it be a newspaper, social media, radio, TV, and all this is very variable depending on the community and culture that you are trying to promote. So while you're doing that, it is very important for you to pay attention to under resource and underrepresented community members, all right? And who are this underrepresented and under-resourced communities? This could be, not could be, but these are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, individuals with disabilities, and those who reside in rural community or in isolated areas, senior citizens, military connected individuals, and finally, people who use or speak English as their second language. How are you going to create a space for them that they could come and participate in the project that you have outlined to do so? What barrier would you put in place to make your project accessible, right? So that it could be financial obstacles, right? Uh, Disability. Are your facilities accessible for persons who have a limited mobility? Language. All those things need to be sort of in your background, in your as you're thinking about this accessibility. And sometimes this could be as a result of making your event more affordable. Would you have reduced price or free tickets or free admissions? If so, how many of this free and reduced tickets would you have under your accessibility? So in a nutshell, the accessibility is about breaking barriers. So all Oklahomans would have access, not only just Oklahomans, all your audience will have access to your beautiful project that you've proposed and have brought forward to the reviewers to review. Next slide, please. All right. So the next session is evaluation. All right. So you've done all this great work. How do you evaluate the success or the failure or where you need to improve the project? Right. What method would you utilize to measure progress towards goals and outcome provided above in the projects that you've talked about? So there are typically two types of two evaluation methods, right? The qualitative and quantitative. The example of quantitative is are you trying to measure the number of participants that you're going to have at your event? Did you reach ticket sales that you had in mind, or whenever you set your goal and your budget? Was your marketing plan effective? Right. So these are like very number-based type of measure of your project. The qualitative is basically it could be did you reach the community engagement goal that you had set in your proposal and your project proposal? Were your audience satisfied? And how do you know how to do this, right? In order to do this, there are different ways of doing this, particularly the qualitative examples. I mean, you could do audience survey, artist staff board survey. The artist staff board survey is specifically to help you to see your own organization. Attendance survey is to sort of see the effectiveness of your project for the broader community. You could do exit poll, testimonials, um, and the media attention by asking questions how they heard about your project. So in the evaluation process, the primary tools that you use uh, to do this would be effective. I mean, a good example that I could tell you to measure your reach is to use zip code data. How far and where did your audience come from? And that will help you understand next time you're trying to promote a project using this data. You can see how far your media promotions is reaching. Are you trying to measure economic impact? Did your patrons support a local business? So all this stuff is dependent upon what type of methodologies that you use for this. And this is best done through survey, right? So in that evaluation method and access, we would expect for you to select two of the resources listed above in the presentation up here: exit poll, artist survey, board members, and so forth. After you do that, give us some examples of or samples of your questions that you're planning to use to accompany the selected survey methodologies. Okay, so next slide, please. Well, I guess let me quickly mention the community needs. This is all right. Let's just go with the community needs, and then we'd add the questions. The community needs. This is very specific project created for your public value. What is the public value of your project for all Oklahomans? Why is your project important to the community? This is very vital for you to disclose this information. This could be informal stories that you gather, or it could also be data or a statistic demonstrating the impact of your project to the communities that you just served. And another question to be thinking about whenever you're thinking about the community needs would be, is this a recurring event? And how are you going to be successfully executing this project, right? So in a nutshell, the community needs are the heartbeat of what your project did for the community. You can collect this in numbers to convince us that, when I say convince us, I'm talking about the review community members, that your project had that importance for the community in that capacity. So those are the three areas that I'm covering here for you, and definitely we will take up any type of questions that you may have.
Thanks, Yakum. Yeah, those are the really great portions of our application. So a few other questions. I think we had one that was for survey. Maybe I read that wrong. Okay, yeah, I don't think we have any questions for the evaluations or the community need at this moment. So Thomas, if you want to go to the next slide, thanks. We'll take it from there.
All right, thank you so much. So next we'll be discussing COVID-19. It looks like some of you do have questions that you've sent in so far. So we'll kind of touch on that in our next slide, where we talk about the take your questions. It looks like a lot of those questions are also pertaining to projects that are currently happening right now too. So for COVID-19, this is specifically right now addressing projects that will be occurring in the next funding cycle in fiscal year 2022. so for the applications that you're sending in right now. We know that it's very difficult during this time to be planning. We don't know what's happening on a day-to-day basis, and it's kind of hard to put together plans when things might change in a few weeks or a few months. So we're just asking for you to submit applications with as much information as detail as possible that you have at the time. So if you're doing an annual project that's occurred many times in the past, maybe just submitting and letting us know what that program is, what you've done in the past, what a list of potential artists might look like, and just let us know in there that this is what you have right now, and this is just what you have at the time. And we definitely understand that. We know that it's hard to make commitments during this time, and you may not be able to be writing up contracts or anything. So again, just send in the applications with what information you have, and making sure that the grant reviewers have all the information they need to assess your program. So give us what you want to do, how you're going to do it, who you want to serve. With all that information, we should know, and we should be able to make a funding determination based on what you provide there. If your artists have not been secured, please include previous or potential artists that you may contract with. If you go this route and you don't have any secured artists, then we do have to provide an updated list of the artists prior to the project taking place. We do ask that you follow local, state, and federal health and safety guidelines when you're conducting your projects and your programs. This is in your grant contracts. And please read your award notification package for additional information and instructions on modifying or canceling your awarded projects. So we do have a process right now for our current funding cycle that we're in, fiscal year 21. The process is outlined in your award notification email. So if you have questions about how to move forward, you can probably find that information there. We're utilizing a COVID-19 impact survey that we ask for you to submit. For the next year, this might look like something else, and we haven't gotten to that place yet. But if you refer back to your award notification email, you should have all the information you need on how to move forward from there. All right, any questions?
Thanks, Thomas. Yes, so I think we had one earlier that's it pertains to this current season. So as Thomas said, please refer to your award notification to find the link to the COVID-19 impact report for the current season. And then if you need help, if you've transitioned over roles and you didn't receive that award notification and need a copy of that, feel free to reach out to Thomas, and Thomas can go ahead and send you that award notification with that link and that information. Another question that we received, it says, each year finalized contracts are required with the support materials with COVID-19. Several of the performing art touring groups we're interested in still have touring dates that are a bit up in the air. So a fully executed contract would not be possible because of COVID. Could letters of commitment work? And so Thomas did touch on that a little bit. Please give us as much information as you can. I think letters of commitment, if that's like what you can get at the time of the application, that would be great. And then closer to the date, we may require more finalized list of your artist and or contracts on that. And the next question says, with the uncertainty of funding in the future, we would most likely move forward with different programming if we do or do not receive this grant. Therefore, we do not feel comfortable with requesting contracts before we receive notification that we have been approved for the grant. I believe this may be a repetitive question, but will the applications be considered without contracts, or are contracts required? So that is just more to touch on that. Please just put in as much information that you do have. I know that we are still planning, but one of the big reasons why we ask for this is although we have been here and we may be familiar with your programs and your projects that you have put on in the past, we do like to recruit community grant reviewers. And so this may be the first time that these individuals that are scoring will be seeing your project. So we want to share as much as because we believe in your programs. And so we want to be able to show them how great your programs are. And so if you are going in a different direction than in the past, or if you are repeating a program, then please give us as much information and details that you can have, or even as Joachim said, like your goals of what you would like your program to look like despite this pandemic. So I hope that that answers. I know it's really, we're telling you a bunch of like, please give us all the information you can, even though we totally understand that you might not have a lot.
I have two things to add to that,
yes.
Heidi. Yes, thanks for going over those responses. I think one thing, the two questions both came from universities and about contracts. And we do understand that sometimes you aren't able to enter into contracts until you have a budget or until the fiscal year for your organization starts. So we definitely understand that, being a state agency as well. You are not required to send in any contracts as part of your application. Please do send in bios for your artists that you are planning to utilize, or if you have artists in mind that you want to reach out to, please send in their bios so we have an idea of what they're presenting and what you want to present. But it's not required that you send in any contracts or any executed contracts. That's part of the support material that Heidi will be going over in a few slides, and that's optional, but again, it is not required.
Thanks, Thomas. And then I think the last question about COVID-19 is, what about rescheduling your project due to COVID-19? What would you need to do? I think that if it's for this current year, please refer to filling out a COVID-19 impact report, or if it's just a project change that doesn't require necessarily an impact report, then you can just contact Thomas. So yeah, I would just refer to your award notification. And then moving forward, Thomas, did you want to touch on that a little bit more for next year's?
Yes, next year's we'll have all of our new processes. If the process changes, you'll definitely know in that award notification. So again, any questions you have pertaining to managing your grant award, if there are changes, if you're changing the date or the delivery, please look back at that award notification. It has all of your instructions in there, and it has links to whatever you do need to complete as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. I think those are all of the questions we have currently. So I think we can continue. Oh, my part. All right, support material. So for just a refresher, and also for our new applicants, what we require is kind of a two-part application process. So you have your online application, which is what Kayla, Joachim, and Thomas have just gone over. And then the second part is submitting support material. And so these are additional documents that we require, and they have to be submitted electronically to the email that is on the screen right now. That's grants@arts.ok.gov. You can send it as email attachments, or what we have seen organizations do, since some of these files may be a little large to send as separate email attachments, you can send it through your preferred cloud storage. So we can take it as a Dropbox link or a Google Drive link. Those links are available to send also to that email. We do request that if you are sending it through a cloud-based storage, that you do not put any passcodes on it, just since we need to be able to access it from our different emails. So just send it as is. Another kind of security tip, please do not send any of your artists or employees or volunteers personal information. Like Thomas said, we don't need to necessarily see contracts. They are optional, so please don't send like their W-9s or social security or any personal information. That is for your records and your records only. We do not need to expose any of those personal details in those attachments. So yes, so since that sensitive information will not be shared, you can just send the link without any passwords. Emails exceeding the 10 megabyte limit should be sent as multiple emails. And if you're doing that, please attach saying that it is, one of 3 or, 2 of 2. We cannot accept it unless all of the files are complete and one. So if it is sent as different pieces, please make sure that they are coming around the same time and that we receive all of it, or else it'll be considered incomplete. Please send your support material documents at the same time, and then they must be submitted by 11:59 p.m. on February 15th. And here is what is required. So for all applicants, we require a resume for each program coordinator, and then the file, if you could name it with your specific project ID number. When you are working on your online application, it will have the project ID number at the very top, and so you can just save the file under that name so we can attach it to your corresponding application, especially if you are submitting all 5 or multiple applications. We want to make sure that the support materials are going for the right projects. Optional support materials that our community grant reviewers love to see is signed and dated artist contracts, although it is not required. And that includes name of artists, dates of service, services provided, and artistic fees. Bios and or resumes of project artists, and then a sample of arts education curricula. And that's mostly for our AES and ALC projects, but you can include those as well. Then for all of our 501c3 organizations, we do require a current list of board members with their address, and then full IRS Form 990 from most recently completed fiscal year. So this is just for 501c3 organizations only. And then a resume for your executive director. And I believe that's it for support materials. Yes, thanks, Thomas.
All right, thank you so much, Heidi. And I will talk about briefly touching on scoring criteria. So the most important thing when you're working through your application, you're putting together your responses to your narrative questions and everything, please refer back to the document that was sent out with your notification emails. This is the grant guidelines document that should have went out back in a few weeks ago. That has information in there. It had general timeline for this grant program. It had instructions about support material. Again, most of the information that we covered today, a lot of that could be found in that guidelines document. And as well as review considerations. These are considerations that we send our grant reviewers. So they will be looking at those points as they're assessing and evaluating your proposals. Please take a look at those, and that will hopefully help you shape your responses and know kind of what frame of mind that the grant reviewers are looking at. All of our grant reviewers will be scoring each section of your proposal. So you have your budget, you have your project description, evaluation methods and access, and community needs. Each of those sections receive a score between 1 to 6, 6 being the highest. And you can see that scale on the screen there. They'll score all of your sections, and then you will receive an average score for your whole application. And that average score from the grant reviewers will be averaged together with the other grant reviewers, as well as our staff and our council members. And that's how we determine the score for an application. An important thing to keep in mind as well, when we send out award notifications, then you see a note from the grant reviewers, and we ask for you to refer to that as well when you're compiling, when you're doing and executing your project, but as well when you're putting together the application for the next year. A lot of them may have questions that we include in that note to you. So please refer back to your old award notifications. You can also access those comments through the grant system as well, which is a nice segue to our next section with Heidi.
Thanks, Thomas. I know we're getting a lot of information, so I welcome you as we are doing this next part to just wiggle your fingers and shake your arms and just get up and move if you need to, as we just finish getting you all the information that we can. So with that being said, here's how you can access the grant system. You can go to arts.ok.gov, and that will take you to our website, where I believe Thomas is directing us now. All right, so from here, you've just typed in arts.ok.gov. You can go to the grants tab, and there's a drop-down menu that'll say grants login. You can click on it, and then this is where you will put your unique login credentials. As a refresher, each organization has two separate logins, the grant contact and then the authorizing official. The grant contact is who has access to actually apply for your grant on behalf of your organization. And then the authorizing official is the individual that can log in and accept the grant award should your project or organization be granted an award. So please make sure that you are using your grant contact. If you had any turnover and need to either get a new person set up for either of these roles, please email me and I will get some information from you, and then we can go ahead and set them up in the grant system and you should be good to go. So Thomas will log in using his grant contact email. And from there, at the top of the page, where Thomas is showing us in this cursor, is where your organization's information will be located. This should be auto-generated based on grant history from the past. If you need to update any of that, please let us know. On the top here is where you can see any of your organization's eligible grant programs. So depending on what your eligibility is for the type of organization that you have, you may see different types of grant programs. And so you will want to look for the 2022 Major Grant Support application. Like we said, since this is for next year's funding cycle, it is under the 2022 name. And the grant period covers July 1 of 2020 to June 30th, 2022. If Thomas, if you can scroll down just for a quick second. If you scroll down under here, under the current grants, that's where you will find any of the grants for this current fiscal year. So things happening for this year for either major grant support or any of the other grants that you may be participating in for the year. All right, we can scroll all the way up to the top real quick. Right here on the right side, there is a button that says Grant History. If you click on it, this will direct you to your organization's previous grant awards. And then, so if you would like to see what you've put in for the questions in the past, that's where you can access it from last year or the year before that. So once you click on it, on the apply button, here's where it'll go through that legal assurances page that Thomas briefly talked about at the beginning of this webinar. And just make sure you enter in all of the information and the information that you need for your organization. And then we can go to the next section. All right, from there, it should pull up the little information. So it'll say application status. It is in working status. If for some reason you need to withdraw, the button will be on the right. And then following, there will be other sections. So it'll be organization information, legal assurances, and then the economic indicators if that pertains to your organization. From there, and that's just a one-time thing. For the entire application process, you will only need to fill that out once. For the projects, since you are eligible to apply for up to 5 projects for your organization, this is the one that will fall in. So if you are an organization that is applying for multiple ones that might fall into different categories, so whether for today's webinar, we're talking specifically about community arts programs. So that's the one that you would click on. But if you were submitting an ALC which is arts learning in communities, or an arts education in schools, then please make sure that you click on the correct project type. You can hit add project. And then here is where you will find all of the sections that Kayla and Joachim went over. So this is the program information, your who, what, when, where, and why on for each individual projects. And then that project ID right there is where you get that unique project ID that I mentioned to attach to your support materials when you submit that. So as you can see, it says complete or incomplete just based on the status of where you are at in your application. And so you can submit that. A few tips and tricks that I like to let people know is you can click on each section and it'll have a section at the bottom that says submit this section in order to continue to move on to the next sections. Now we do get questions saying if the submitting this button is the entire thing, and that is no, that's just for this specific question. So you can come back and work on it as you are doing that. So then it'll have edit if you need to go back and edit. Let's see down there. Okay. The other question that we often get is right there. There's a print preview button. If you click on that, that will give you a full version of the application for you to see either what questions you will have, or if you've already filled in all of the information and you need to get a print preview and send it to, sometimes you need to send it to like a board president or someone in your organization to kind of just look over it, make sure that everything is the way that you want it before you can actually submit the entire application. You can do that and access it that way. So I think that's a very quick overview of the application. For some things that we have found successful is to not let your window stay logged in for more than 15 minutes without being active. Sometimes it will kick you off and then it won't save the selection you're working on unless you hit submit this section. And then please do not work on this with multiple windows open. Sometimes that throws the server off as to which part of the application you're working on. And I would hate for your work to not get saved because it thinks that you're working on a different section. So if you want to use the print preview button and have all of your answers in a separate document, and so you can take your time to figure out what words and what numbers you need to get, and then go back and insert that information, we recommend that route, or just getting all of your information filled out and then seeing it all on the print preview button before you hit submit. So just once you're done, please make sure you hit the submit button and you should be good to go. All right. So we gave you all the information. We walked through the system and how to navigate it. And now it is up to you if you have any other last questions, or if any of our staff wants to kind of share any other tips and tricks or any other comments, I will pass it along.
All right, thank you so much, Heidi, for that walkthrough. Again, like Heidi said, if you have any questions, please send them in using the Q&A function. In your registration form for this workshop, some of you sent in some questions through the registration, so I'll read some of them that we haven't addressed yet today. There was a question asking for any help with language and verbiage. As you're putting together your narratives and your responses, again, please look at those review considerations and the guiding questions that we provide in your grant guidelines document. Those are just leading questions and things that you might want to keep in mind as you're putting together and crafting your narrative. So responding with those in mind, and also keeping in mind our agency, what we do. We are the state agency to support the arts. Our primary goal is arts education, arts access. So how is your program addressing access, and how are you reaching Oklahomans who may not be participating in your program otherwise, and how are you creating new avenues so that more people can come and participate and experience your programs? So keep those in mind as you're putting together your responses. I had another question regarding answering impacts of lack of funding. I believe that Jakob briefly went over this in terms of the community needs response. Please put into there the significance of the program for your community. Really let us know the impact. If you have any impactful stories you wanted to tell, or if you have hard data, do you have data showing that the arts, incorporating the arts helps increase satisfaction or helps people come to your organization or visit your shop more? Put that information into the community needs section there. Let's see here. Other questions. One asks about funding priorities. So how do we determine how much a grant application is funded at an award level? There are many different considerations that come into place. Again, please submit the strongest proposal that you can put together. Look at all of your sections, look at the guiding questions and the review considerations, what we will be scoring you on, and address all of those points so that you have all the tools there to put together what you want to submit. And then we will be looking at the applications, scoring them. Our priorities are to fund projects that increase access to the arts for Oklahomans, arts education, arts learning, geographically isolated areas, and also projects that are serving or targeting a population that is under-resourced or underrepresented. So those are our agency priorities. And if you are putting together a program, keep those things in mind and to see if that aligns with what we want to do. Let's see here. And then one last question is someone asked about how to best prepare a proposal and general grant writing information for beginners. So the best piece of advice was when you're putting together a grant application, especially for the first time, is you want to follow all the directions that are asked and answer all of the questions that are asked. Don't pick and choose. If we have a question and there are multiple parts, like question 2, parts A, B, C, and D, address parts A, B, C, and D. We're not asking for just number 2, part A. We want the answers to all of those. Make sure that you clearly answer all of those questions, be as concise as possible, but include as much detail as possible. Our grant reviewers may not be familiar with your program, so more information about what you're doing so that we get a better view of all the work that you want to achieve in the next year. And then we know that there are lots of things going on right now and things might change, but please submit what you have at the time. Submit your application to the best of your knowledge. I know that we are running over time right now. We want to be respectful of your time. So the time is now 3:35 p.m. If you have any additional questions, please let us know by sending us an email or giving us a call. Our contact information is on the screen, and we are always here to help you. That's what we're here for. So we wish you the best of luck as you put together your project proposals for the next funding cycle. We look forward to reading them, and we look forward to seeing all the fantastic work that you do to support the arts in Oklahoma. Thank you so much for all you do. Thanks for keeping the arts alive, and we hope to talk to you soon. Have a nice day. Thank you.